Hello, and welcome to Burns Banter, the podcast that takes a fresh look at the life and works of Robert Burns, hosted by myself, Alistair Turnbull. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been taking a look at the life of Robert from his birth, and I'm going to take it all the way through till he dies, and maybe a bit further on after that. But I'm taking a break this week, because this week I have been working on my Festival Fringe show. Yes, I'm going to go to Edinburgh this year and I'm going to do a show at the Edinburgh Fringe. And the show is basically going to be Burns Banter Live. It's going to be like an episode of the podcast, but with a bit more songs, and maybe a couple of more jokes, maybe a quiz thrown in. And I would love to see any of the people who listen to the podcast to come along and join me. Now, I am playing from the 16th of August till the 25th of August, okay, apart from the 24th. And the reason I'm not playing the 24th is because I'm actually the best man at my friend's wedding on that day. I can't do it that day. But if you're available, I would love to see you at my show. Again, 16th of August to the 25th of August, and it's up at a place called the Pear Tree, which is in Nicholson Street. The Pear Tree is a pub. The upstairs in the Pear Tree is called the Counting House. So I am in the Counting House and I'm in a room called the Attic. And the show is from 10:30 in the morning until 11:30. So it's an hour long. Just a sort of longer episode type thing. And what I'm going to do is, in this episode, I'm going to play some excerpts from a warm-up gig that I did last night. Basically, bits that you hear in the next wee while are bits that may well be in the show. And again, I would love to see you there. It's a free show. You do not need a ticket, but it's first come, first served. I think there's about 45, 50 seats in the venue. It's not large. So if you want to come along, 16th to the 25th of August, 10:30 in the morning, Burns Banter Live at the Counting House in Nicholson Street. So I'll leave you with that. I'll play some excerpts from the warm-up gig, which went quite well. I'm going to change some things. And if you enjoy what you hear, please come along to the gigs. And I heard my dad. Now, my dad's he wasn't a guy for public speaking very much. He was quite a quiet guy. And I heard him saying these words. And the words I heard him saying were, Willie Wabster dwelt on Tweed. Willie Wassell dwelt on Tweed, the place they called it Lincoln-Dory. Willie was a Wabster gid, could stone a clue with onybody. Willie's wife was dour and din. Her mother was old Tinker Major. Sick a wife as Willie had. I wouldn't gie a button for her. And I thought, what was my dad saying? What are all these words? I thought he'd had a stroke or something, but he kind of just, I'd never understood a thing. And I said, Dad, what are you doing? He says, what is that? He says, it's a poem called Willie Wassell. It's a Robert Burns poem. I went, oh yeah, it's, what language is that? And he says, I said, is it Gaelic? What language is it? He said, no, it's Old Scots. And I went, well, he was half right. It is Old Scots, okay? But it's not just Old Scottish language. Because the one thing that hands up here, who understood any of the words of Willie Wassell? Some words, right? Who understood like 10% of the words of Willie Wassell,
I think so.
And that's the major thing for Burns. It's a major thing. It's the language. You can't get past it. And the language that he actually spoke in was, it was Old Scots. But you know how in Aberdeen they have like a dialect called Doric, right? Right? Do you know the Doric, do you?
I'm an Aberdonian.
Yeah, well, you're one of the Quines, are you? There we go. Well, they have words like quines and loons, which are girls and boys. But Burns, he wrote in a dialect called Lallans, which was a lowland dialect for Ayrshire and Dumfries. So they had their own words for things as well. So my dad was half right. He said it was Old Scots, but it's actually Old Scots in Lallans. He wrote it when he was in Mauchline. He was at his mate Jim I'm not going to I forget the guy's name. He was a cabinet maker in Mauchline, right? His name was Jim, right? And his second name, I think it was Morrison, but I'm thinking the guy for the Doors, isn't I? He didn't go to Jim Morrison's and have a meal of haggis and sing. That would be a turn up for the books right there and then, but that never happened. and on the 25th of January 1759 they had their first son named Robert Burns. So Robert Burns was born into a 2-room house made by his own father on a small piece of ground in Ayr, and they were penniless, absolutely penniless. But he had one advantage. William was educated and believed in education for his kids. Can anybody tell me what sort of percentage of people in Scotland in 1760 were literate? Any ideas?
I have not, 85%.
You think 85%? Anybody else?
10%.
About 10%.
You'd be less than that, 8%.
8%. I'll tell you, in that time, 60% of men were literate and 40% of women were literate. The women were still treated like second-class citizens. But Robert worked on the wee small holding with his mum during the day and helped his dad as well. And there was a couple of brothers and sisters came along. He had a younger brother called Gilbert and a daughter came along called Annabella. And at night when they were finished working, Robert's dad, William, would read to them from the Psalms in the Bible. And he would get them to try and work out the words as well. So William taught Robert about how to read and write from reading the Bible. Once he couldn't do that anymore, he got together with another 4 farming families, and they hired a tutor, a guy called John Murdoch. He had just finished college himself, and he came in and he taught the Burns family and other families how to read, how to write, arithmetic. He also taught them French, he taught them Latin, and they taught them music as well. John Murdoch was interviewed years after Burns had died, and they asked John Murdoch, he said, what kind of pupil was Robert Burns? What was he like? And John Murdoch said, well, he was a voracious reader, an absolutely voracious reader. He got through hundreds and hundreds of books, and that's where John Murdoch really helped him, because he had access to libraries, whereas they couldn't afford any books on the farm. And he said, aye, voracious reader, very, very good. And he says when it came to music though, his voice was untunable. He could not sing a note, couldn't sing a note at all. Once I loved a bonny lass, and I love her still. And whilst the virtue warms my breast, I love my handsome Nell. As bonny lasses I have seen, and mony fullows braw, but for a modest graceful mien, the like I never saw. A bonny lass, I will confess, is pleasant to the ee, but without some finer qualities, she's no a lass for me. But Nellie's looks are blithe and sweet, and what is best of all, her reputation is complete, and fair without a flaw. She dresses icy clean and neat, both decent and genteel, and there's something in her gait gars ony dress look weel. A gaudy dress and gentle air may slightly touch the heart, but it's innocence and modesty that polishes the dart. 'Tis this in Nellie pleases me, 'tis this enchants my soul, for absolutely in my breast she reigns without control. Robert Burns' first ever poem at the age of 15, after doing a couple of days working in the fields. And that was his inclination. He wrote his first poem to introduce himself to a girl. That was why he first wrote a poem. That became a bit of a theme in his life, to tell you the truth, but I don't want you to take my word for it, because a couple of years later, Robert was asked about this poem, and he said, why did you start writing poetry? And he wrote an answer in a letter to his friend. So this is Robert Burns' own words. I'll read them out to you just now, okay? He said, I never had the least thought or inclination of turning poet until I got once heartily in love. And then rhyme and song were, in a manner, the spontaneous language of my heart. I remember I composed it in a wild enthusiasm of passion, and to this hour I never recollect it, but my heart melts and my blood sallies at the remembrance. Right, okay, first word is agley. Agley, A-G-L-E-Y. Is that a Burns word, or is it a piece of IKEA furniture?
That's a Burns.
Right, who? So, you should know better. It's Burns, it's definitely a Burns. So you got it wrong, sit down. You got it wrong, sit down. There we go, right? A gley is actually into a moose. It's the best laid schemes of mice and men aft gang a gley. A gley means wrong, goes wrong, okay? The second word, now I'm hoping you're going to get this one, thrave.
Single straw.
Right, you've all gone Burns because it's a thrave, it's a bundle of straw, that's right, okay, right. Right, gladum. Is gladum a Burns word or is it a piece of IKEA furniture?
All right.
All right, all right, we've got one Burns when everybody else has gone IKEA. Okay, gladum is a small steel tray with black powder put in. So, there we go. But in Moskiel Farm, in those years, 1785, 1786, he wrote some of the best poetry he ever would in his life, apart from one or two small pieces. He wrote Holy Willie's Prayer. He wrote To a Moose. He wrote The Jolly Beggars, which is basically a mini opera, or a cantata if you want to call it its proper name. But he wrote also a poem called The Holy Fair, which is one of Robert's best. It gets the most description, the most emotion, the most display of wordsmithship is in The Holy Fair. It's absolutely fabulous. And all at this time in Moskiel. But when his father died, he kind of lost track of things a bit. He started what we now know Robert's well known for. He started sort of compensating things by relationships with women. And he had a relationship, had a baby with a woman, Elizabeth Patton her name was, and then he moved on to a girl called Jean Armour. And Jean Armour was one of the Mauchline Belles. That's one of the girls, it was a group of nice girls in Mauchline that he liked. And but 2 months after started seeing her, she was pregnant as well. And he didn't waste his time. No, he was. I would say he was right in there, but I'm not going to say that. So, but and he wanted to marry Jean Armour. He wanted to marry her, but he went to her father, a guy called James Armour, who was a stonemason, and he said, "I've got Jean pregnant." And it's said that Jean's father fainted when he heard the news that Jean was pregnant by Robert Burns. But when he got himself back together again, you would have thought he would get the shotgun out and take him straight up to the church. But no, he turned around to Robert and said, "I want nothing to do with you. I have heard your reputation. You are the worst farmer in the area. You write poetry and loose poetry and all the rest. You've been with other women. I want nothing to do with you. Leave my daughter alone." I mean, how bad is your reputation got to be when you go to a girl's dad and say, "I've got her pregnant," and he says, "Right, beat it." You know what I mean? Leave it. But that's what it is. So he was left. It's kind of destitute, didn't know what to do. He went back to the farm again, he wrote more poetry. That's when he wrote To a Moose. And he was ploughing one day in the fields at Moskiel, just outside of Mauchline. And he wrote To a Moose. And what it was that to us is just a nice wee poem about a mouse in a field. Okay, it's a nice wee poem, a nice wee rustic thing about a mouse in a field. It's not that at all. And I'm going to go through and kind of tell you a bit more about it because... So my next quiz is, I'm going to give you the name of someone, okay? And is it one of his pals, or is it a politician? Right? So pal or politician, right? Okay? So we'll just do hands up this time. Instead of standing up, we'll do right hand up for pal, left hand up for politician, right? Now I only worked out 5 of these before I came down today, so we might not have a clear winner before the end of this, but we'll try it anyway. Let's try it, right, okay. So, the first name I'm going to give you is Robert Aitken.
What was what? Right was...
Robert Aitken.
Our right or your left?
Right for pal, left for politician, right? Right for pal, left for all politician, right? You just changed your hand there, that was, right, okay. Robert Aitken was one of Robert's best friends. His best friends. He nicknamed him. Robert Aitken was a lawyer, and he was a lawyer in Dumfries, and he was so good at speaking. He nicknamed him Orator Bob. And he named him Orator Bob in a poem called "The Kirk's Alarm," and he also dedicated The Cotter's Saturday Night, which is another great poem, to Robert Aitken in his book, chiefly Poems Chief to Sort Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed doing the gig last night. I made lots of mistakes, but that's what a warm-up gig's all about. I'm going to change the format slightly because I learned some things worked and some things didn't. But please come along to the shows. Again, it's the 16th to the 25th of August at the Counting House in the Attic. And the name of the show is Burns Banter Live. I would love to see you there. Next week, I'm going to get back into talking about Burns' life again. We're going to take off from where we left off in the last episode. But until then, Slán Java.